Hello students! Today we are going to explore the character of Mr. Enfield from Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In this module, we will explore two of Mr. Enfield's key characteristics, starting with how he embodies the typical Victorian gentleman. Today we turn our attention to the enigmatic character of Mr. Enfield. By examining his eagerness to avoid scandal, his preoccupation with reputation, and his apparent hypocrisy, we will uncover how Mr. Enfield embodies the quintessential Victorian gentleman and acts in accordance to the key socio-historical values of the Victorian era. Let's begin. Enfield is willing to do anything to avoid a scandal, so much so that he often sacrifices justice and morality in preference of keeping himself out of any potentially damaging situations. This is best shown in his words.
The more it looks like Queer Street, the less I ask.
Enfield is absolutely terrified by the idea of a scandal being associated with his name. He expresses to Utterson that he makes it a rule for himself not to interfere with any situations that appear suspicious, immoral, or untoward. Indeed, despite inadvertently finding himself involved in Hyde's trampling of a young girl, and subsequently seeing that the cheque he extorts out of Hyde is in Jekyll's name, Enfield makes no further efforts to investigate the situation. Despite suspecting that his friend may be involved with wicked criminals, Enfield is more concerned with becoming immersed in a scandal than he is with pursuing justice or the fulfillment of his loyalty to Jekyll. The more scandalous a situation may be, the less he gets involved, with no consideration for the potential consequences of his ignorance. Moving on to our second example, Enfield is acutely conscious of the critical importance of reputation for men who called themselves gentlemen in Victorian society. He thus recognises the potency that a threat to this reputation can carry, stating,
Killing being out of the question, we did the next best. We told the man we could, and would make such a scandal out of this as should make his name stink from one end of London to the other.
This quote highlights Enfield's awareness of the critical nature of reputation in several ways. Firstly, the simplicity and blasé confidence of the statement, killing being out of the question, indicates that killing is not something that Enfield is emotionally or morally opposed to, but something that he simply cannot do, as it would similarly destroy his reputation in the process. Secondly, the phrase, we did the next best, suggests that scandal is equivalent to death as a punishment in Victorian society. In this period, the loss of reputation was essentially a social death in itself because of the isolation and hatred that stems from a scandal. Thirdly, the hyperbolic nature of the threat that he would make his name stink from one end of London to the other emphasises the critical significance afforded to reputation in Victorian society. Enfield believes that a single scandal is powerful enough to make the entirety of London's population despise Hyde, a powerful insight into the prevalence of gossip and the tendency of Victorian society to turn against anyone in an instant. Enfield's witness of Hyde's heartless attack on the young girl occurs in suspicious circumstances. Enfield himself narrates,
I was coming home from some place at the end of the world, about 3 o'clock of a black winter morning.
Here, Enfield deliberately chooses not to name the place that he is walking home from, and instead using the poetic description of some place at the end of the world. While such poeticism attempts to distract his listener from the specifics, the reader is left to wonder where Enfield been at 3 a.m. The phrase, some place at the end of the world, may be indicative of the distance which Enfield has travelled from his home to participate in whatever he has been doing. Many Victorian gentlemen were known to travel outside of their direct neighbourhoods to visit brothels or engage in illicit behaviour, the idea being that such distance would ensure their hidden needs would not be witnessed by anyone who could recognise them and smear their name. The implications for Enfield, then, are that he is potentially returning from a pursuit which he would not dare to name or engage in close to home, for fear of attracting a scandal. Given Enfield's outward respectability, such behaviour would be particularly shocking and exists as an example of the hypocrisy and farcical nature of status in 19th century England. And that brings us to the end of today's lesson, students. We explored Mr. Enfield as a quintessential Victorian gentleman through his fear of scandal, obsession with reputation, and hypocritical behaviour. We saw how Enfield prioritises avoiding scandal over justice, understood the powerful role of reputation in Victorian society, and recognises his own secretive, dubious actions. Remember to keep revising this lesson and see you next time.